Hi there, welcome to your Research Refresher / WOA brief training with LexisNexis. My name again is Katrina Julia Nepicina. I'm your Lexis Rep research attorney at Berkeley Law, and I'm really excited to be with you guys today or to talk to you about this because I enjoyed written and oral advocacy a lot while I was in law school. I was part of my law school's distinguished advocacy program. And I was a TA for our legal skills program, so I helped a lot of 1Ls with their very first brief assignment. And now, as a Lexis rep at law schools, I help a lot of 1Ls continue to work on some of their first persuasive brief assignments. So I've learned a thing or two, as well as heard a thing or two about what students most often struggle with. And so in today's training, the purpose of today's training is to really refresh your research memory as well as go over some tips and strategies to help you save time and energy with your WOA brief case list assignment. I know you guys have a case list due early next week. And from what I've heard from your WOA professors, you guys are doing a problem on grand jury proceedings and something having to do with the secrecy or disclosure issues with grand jury proceedings. However, I've been asked not to teach directly to the problem, so the problem that we're going to be working with today is one that's very close to my heart. It was my very first issue when I was a 1L, but I've kind of changed the facts a little bit to be a little bit more fun. And if you haven't already, go ahead and log on to Lexis Advanced, making sure that you get your daily research points, but also so that you can follow along with us today. I've also included in the message that I sent out a copy of the handout to go along with today's training so that you can download it, print it, whatever it is you want to do, and follow along and have these tips at your fingertips. Okay, but at the top of that handout, you guys have a research plan. And while we're not going to do your exact problem today, please know that this research plan can translate to any assignment that you have now and in the future. So with your WOA brief, as well as any other research assignment you may be given with work or at school. So the fact pattern that we're going to work with, let's just go ahead and jump right in. The fact pattern that we're working with has to do with the First Amendment. So as your handout says, we are attorneys for Valley School District. I'm a huge Saved by the Bell fan. Hopefully you guys are too. And Jessie Kapowski is a student at Bayside Middle School, which is within the Valley School District, and she's very involved in student council. Her social studies teacher arranged for her class to attend a talk given by an assistant U.S. attorney one day after school at the Max across the street. The AUSA was speaking at a town hall against the legalization of marijuana. Jessie and her fellow student council members led the Pledge of Allegiance to start the event. At the end, during the Q&A for the AUSA, Jessie suddenly unveiled a 3x5 banner that read, "Bong hits for kicks." The next day, Bayside Middle School suspended Jessie for her pro-drug banner at what they considered a school event. Jessie's parents, on behalf of Jessie, filed a civil rights lawsuit against Valley School District, claiming that Bayside Middle School violated her First Amendment rights when it disciplined her for exercising free speech off campus. So now, at trial, the lower court found for Jessie and her parents. It held that Bayside actually did infringe upon Jessie's First Amendment rights when it exercised control over her speech at what they considered an off-campus event, but not considered to be school-sponsored. So now, our client, Valley School District, has filed an appeal, and we're responsible for drafting the brief. Okay, so first things first, covering the basics one more time. Anytime you're given a research assignment, you review the facts, you review the file, everything that you've been given, and now comes the point where you're ready to go ahead and start your research. Well, once we jump into this red search box, it's a lot like searching on Google. You're trying to brainstorm to yourself, what are the best keywords or terms for me to run in this search box to return the hits or results that I want and that will be relevant to my research. So when we're thinking on part 1 of your handout of where to start formulating your search, step 1 in the research plan that I've given you is to identify the course of action or legal defense. This is because anytime you're starting research, once you've been given all your facts and the whole file and you've reviewed it, you want to figure out what the law is that you're actually trying to research. So lead with the law. This means what is the cause of action or what is the legal defense. So in this particular case, we're dealing with the First Amendment. So let's go ahead and start typing that into our red search box. I'm going to put it in quotes because I want First Amendment to appear exactly that way when my results are retrieved. We're going to do /P within the same paragraph as student speech. And again, if you need a little refresher on terms and connectors, because this is going to help us retrieve results quicker that are more relevant to our issue. If you need a refresher on those terms and connectors, you guys, you have this advanced search link on the top right of your red search box, as well as we'll be doing table tips throughout the semester. And the first one we have coming up is on terms and connectors. So your student reps can show you, give you some pointers as to how to run an efficient search on Lexis using your terms and connectors. But these are the phrases that I want to find. I want to find them exactly this way within the same paragraph of one another. So let's go ahead and find or run our search, hitting that red magnifying glass. So once we run that, just remember, you guys, it's the same thing that you guys learned in LRW. This is nothing new. Anytime you're running research or doing research on an unfamiliar area of law, or it's a new problem for you, you want to start in your secondary materials. For some of you guys, you're just starting con law, so you don't know too much about the First Amendment. With your grand jury proceeding issue, you might not know a whole lot about that. Maybe you covered it a little bit in Civ Pro or in Crim Law, I'm sorry. But let's say you don't have too much knowledge about it. So same thing that you learned in LRW, you want to start in a secondary source. So we're going to go over here in our results page. In this gray box on the left-hand side, we want to go to the third filter from the top, go into our secondary materials. Remembering that our secondary sources are what helps us understand this area of law a little bit better. You want to get the context or background information before you just start jumping into your primary law, your cases and your statutes. You need to understand the legal landscape first, see how this all fits together before getting lost in the facts of each individual case. Okay? So here we are in our secondary materials filter. We see we have 1,300 results, or over 1,300 results. So this is the point where we can start narrowing. So remember at the top where we ran our search over here, our First Amendment student speech search, now this is where we can start inserting a legally significant fact. So when I say legally significant fact, what I'm talking about are those facts that your legal analysis actually turns on. So all the facts that you've been given by your professor, your supervising attorney, they're not going to all be created equal. Okay, so the fact that Jesse is a student at Bayside Middle School, while that might be important, it doesn't actually change the legal analysis, right? So we need to figure out the major issue is this is off campus, but she was there representing the school. So is that actually a school-sponsored event? Is that considered something where she's representing the school? So that's what I'm talking about. Look for those facts that your legal analysis will turn on. So here within search within results, I'm going to put in at least 2, no spaces. Okay, this is another pro tip, great filter to, great term to use when you're running these terms and connector searches. At least 2, no space, in parentheses. We're going to do school sponsored. I'm just putting a dash in the middle. And what this is going to do is that it's going to find any results that mention school sponsored at least 2 times. Now this number here, you can change it between 2 to 5 to determine how many times you want to find the results in your results list, or how many times you want to find your term in that results list. So let's go ahead and hit enter. And then at this point, so now we've kind of cut it down to like half our results. Now that we've run that, our search within results, we want to go to under category. So again, if you don't see category filters open, you just need to click that arrow on the left. And here I always tell people the best place to start a lot of times are going to be in your treatises. So let's choose treatises under the category filter. And this is because your treatises, remember, are those sources that are written by the go-to experts in that field of law. So this is as if you're going to Dean Chemerinsky's office and saying, hey, Dean Chemerinsky, I have this issue where we're dealing with the First Amendment and I don't know too much about it. Can you point me in the right direction? Because he's going to give you an idea of, the major landmark cases and statutes for you to look at. So that's why we want to look in our treatises. So again, those are going to be written by your go-to experts in that field of law, as if you're going to professor's office hours and they're pointing you in the right direction for your primary law sources. So the first one we see here is this education law source. And you can read the title, Rules Affected by the First and 14th Amendments. This chapter is on student safety, control, and discipline. And I see here that my terms appear quite often. And it looks like from the context of the preview that this is something that might be actually relevant to my research. So let's go ahead and click on education law right here, this first option. And like I said, when you're in a treatise, this is going to point you to, it's going to give you that legal landscape, the background information, understanding the context of how these cases and statutes or cases and laws fit together when it comes to the First Amendment in student speech. And it will give you, your landmark decisions, Tinker v. Des Moines. It gives you an idea of understanding student constitutional protections, linking you to cases and statutes from within the text of the actual treatise itself or within this the footnotes that you find here. So for instance, if I just go back up to the top, I'm going to say, okay, in the landmark decision, Tinker. Okay, Tinker is a landmark decision when we're talking about student speech. This is what this treatise is telling me. So I'm going to click on this footnote, the number you see in this green box, and that will give me a link straight to that Tinker case so I can go read that a little bit more when I have time. Quick pro tip for you guys. When you are looking at a treatise and you're finding all of these great cases and you're like, okay, here I can link straight to it, my suggestion to you would be first to read through the treatise enough for you to get your bearings straight. You want to understand the background and context first before you go ahead and start clicking away into cases. Again, you don't want to get ahead of yourself and get lost in the weeds before you understand what's happening in this area of law. So read through the treatise, get your bearings straight, and then once you're ready, go ahead and start clicking into some of those links. You can, save it to another document where you have a list of those cases you're going to refer to later. Or even better, staying organized, saving this to a folder that you'll create for your WOA class. So if you haven't already, up here, remember you find this folder icon in this menu at the top of your screen. And here's where I've already created one because I did this with the people who came to training. But for you guys, remembering if you need to create a folder, you just go to this option at the very bottom where it says choose a folder. You want to go create new folder over here on the right. And if I'm going to do WOA First Amendment, create that folder. Once it's bolded, that's where I know this is going to save into my WOA First Amendment folder. So now I've saved this treatise in there so that I can refer back to it when I need to. And also, once I'm ready to start looking at the cases, then I can just directly link from that place. The reason why I showed you guys how to save to your folders one more time is because I think it's really very important to stay organized when you're talking about putting together your first persuasive brief. You're going to be reading through a lot of sources, going through a lot of cases, and there's different sections of your brief that you'll want to make sure that you stay organized. So creating the folder is your first step in doing that. You can create subfolders within that WOA First Amendment folder. And then, perhaps you want to say, these are going to be my rules, this is going to be my argument. So then you want to save your sources to those specific subfolders to help you stay organized. Okay, so we've looked at treatises now. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and go to part 2 of our handout. So part 2, so now that we understand what's happening with First Amendment student speech, we got our bearings straight, we understand the context of it, now we're ready to go ahead and start looking at our actual primary law, our cases and statutes. So I'm going to use my arrow on the bottom right to go ahead and scroll to the top. And remember, our terms are still here at the top. Okay, so I'm just going to rerun the search that we originally ran, First Amendment within the same paragraph of student speech. Run that search one more time because now we're going to move to a different filter. Of course, like I said, you can link straight from the treatise, but just by way of research refresher, I want to show you how, again, to navigate through the different filters you'll find on Lexis when you're running your searches. So first we started in our secondary materials. Now we're going to go first to our statutes and legislation because this is where I want to find the actual First Amendment and see how courts have interpreted the First Amendment. So statutes and legislation is where I'll find, again, any statutes, amendments, anything that's been codified, we'll find in this filter. So here, again, I can go ahead and put my school-sponsored term in the search within results box to narrow it down for myself. And then when I do that, what'll come up is this First Amendment. And I know this is the First Amendment because USCS, Constitutional Amendment 1, is up here at the top. So now I'm like kind of reading through, and I see school sponsors mentioned here, First Amendment student speech. So let's go ahead and click on the actual text, and I'll show you why in a second why this is important. So we're going to click on the text itself where our terms appear in the preview. And this will bring us straight to the part of the case notes in the First Amendment that actually talks about it. So a quick note as this loads, when you guys are looking up constitutional amendments or any major statutes, just know that sometimes there'll be multiple sections of it. So the First Amendment, because I've done this problem a million times, the First Amendment has 7 parts to it. It's not that the text of the First Amendment itself has 7 parts. It's the case notes within it that are going to be different. So here we are. You'll see that these are, this is talking about schools and education generally, section 1352. So let me click this blue arrow on the left-hand side so you can see what we're doing or what this is exactly. So like I mentioned, scrolling back to the top, this is part 6 of 7 of the First Amendment on Lexis. Now, the text, again, like I said, is the same. So this is going to all be the same right here on all 7 parts of it. What is different are these case notes that come after it. And what case notes are those notes or decisions that will help us interpret how the First Amendment applies to student speech. This is because on statutes and any statutes that you'll find on Lexis, your case notes will help you see how courts have interpreted your particular law. This is helpful because while you can say, okay, this is what the law says, it's pretty clear, black and white, it's not always going to be that easy for us. So our job as attorneys or legal advocates is to advocate within the gray area in the interest of our client. So it's easy to say, okay, this is what the statute says, but how is it actually applied to particular sets of facts? So these are what our case notes are going to be. So this is what's going to be different or what's going to vary between the different subparts of the actual First Amendment. So remember, we were in section 1352. So if I scroll all the way down, when we first clicked into it, I'm going to scroll down. But then I also see 1359 right here is about speeches by students. So again, if I click this blue arrow, it's going to bring me to a list of cases that have interpreted the First Amendment for me, talking about student speech, so that I can get a better idea of how the facts actually apply, or how the law actually applies to particular sets of facts that are related to my particular issue. Again, another resource for you to collect more cases. Okay, so now that was looking at your statutes and making sure you check your case notes to help you find cases that interpret your law. Let's go ahead and scroll back to the top. Again, I'm going to use my toggle on the bottom right. We're going to run the search up in the search box one more time. So first we looked at our secondary materials, right, in our filters on the left. Then we looked at our statutes and legislation. Now we're ready to go ahead and start looking at our cases. Remember, Lexis has something called search term maps where we highlight in multicolor for you your terms so that you can actually see in this little diagram right here where your terms appear. So this one has a lot of orange, which is on student speech, and you can scroll down and take a look at that. Also, of course, we give you your overview so you can quickly determine, okay, is this case going to be helpful or relevant to my research? So remembering in our treatise, when we saw the cases there, we could have linked from there, and we probably would have seen these cases that are listed here up at the top. But again, just by way of research refresher, I'm showing you how to navigate straight from the filter itself. So clicking on Morse v. Frederick, let's go ahead and look at that case from the very top of our results list. And I just want to say a quick note, like going back to the research plan that I have for you guys here. When you're looking at your cases and you're trying to figure out which cases do I actually need to include in my case list? What do I need to incorporate into my brief? Ask yourself a couple of things. So first, is this case appearing in multiple sources that I've looked at? So is this case appearing in my treatises? Am I finding it in my case notes? Is it at the top of my results list when I run my search terms? So those will signal to you, if you're running into some of the same cases, those are going to signal to you that those are the important cases that you want to include in your brief. The other thing that you want to think about when you're choosing cases that you actually want to use and save is that you want to choose those cases that actually have a good discussion of the law. So while this particular case in the overview mentions it's talking about student speech, pro-drug banner, that type of thing, it's really on point for my particular set of facts, you might not find cases that are exactly on point and that fit so nicely with your grand jury proceeding issue. So my tip to you is that you want to go ahead and look for cases that have a good discussion of the law. So when I say good discussion of the law, I'm talking about having setting out tests for review, or defining certain legal terms that are going to affect your analysis. And this is because if you find a case that maybe isn't so on point with your facts, but has a good solid foundation or discussion of the law, then it's a lot easier to go and use that and then just apply the facts to the law that's discussed there. So then you can use that within your analysis. Because if you do it the other way, if you're only focused on finding cases that are on point with your particular set of facts, but it doesn't have a good discussion of the law, then you don't have a whole lot to base your application off of. I hope that makes sense, but all I'm trying to say is it's a lot easier to analyze and apply discussions of the law than it is to use something that's just completely on point with your facts, but maybe a little flimsier on the law. Okay, so either way, we're going to look at this case, Morse v. Frederick, and remembering anytime you're on Lexis, you guys, when I talked to you the very first time in the beginning of the school year, I told you you have case summaries on every case that you'll find on Lexis, and we talked about this in the context of briefing for your classes, but now talking about researching for your actual WOA class. Your case summary is going to help you quickly determine whether this is going to be a relevant, helpful case for you. So of course, you have your procedural posture, how this case worked its way up through the courts. Then you have your overview of the key facts and legal issues. Who were the major players in this case? What were they arguing about? What facts did their legal analysis turn on? Then you have the outcome of the case below that. Okay, so the overview is where you really want to take a close look and say, okay, is this going to be something that's relevant or applicable in the same way when I'm talking about the law to my particular set of facts? Okay, so once you go through the case summary and you figure out, okay, am I going to keep this case or am I going to let this one go? If you decide you're going to keep this case, the next place you want to look are going to be your LexisNexis head notes right below the case summary. So one more time, you guys, I can't emphasize enough how important your head notes are going to be and how helpful they can be to you anytime you're doing research. This is one of my go-to features as a student, but even more so now as a practicing attorney. So your LexisNexis head notes, again, in case you forgot, are going to be your key points of law or the rules of law that were announced in this Morse v. Frederick case. Okay. The thing is, the nice thing that we do for you is our super smart research attorneys have gone through the entire opinion of Morse v. Frederick and pulled out those key points of law for you and put it in a list that's much more easier to read and easier to digest. The other great thing about our head notes are that they come verbatim, word for word from the court's opinion. So you don't have to worry about, okay, was this editorialized or summarized inaccurately by some random person? No, this is directly in the court's language. So when you click on the head note itself and you decide, okay, I actually want to use this rule and copy and paste it into my brief, you'll know that this is actually coming from the actual opinion of the court. So for instance, let's go ahead and start looking through this list and see, okay, are there going to be rules here in this particular case that I want to use for my brief? Looking first, the first head note we see where our terms are actually highlighted or where they appear is head note 2, and this is saying a school principal may, consistent with the First Amendment, restrict student speech at a school event when that speech is reasonably viewed as promoting illegal drug use. So I'm like, wow, that's great. That's perfect for my position. I can go ahead and click head note 2 over here on the left-hand side, and it will drop me into the actual text of the court's opinion so that I can go ahead and copy and paste that into my brief. So here, if I go click on this, if I select the text that I want to copy and paste or save into my folder, I can do that. I can add it to the folder. I can also do this really cool thing called copy advanced. So more than just copying and pasting it, what I can do is if I click copy, and then I choose, if I want it in California citation format or if I want it in Blue Book format, I want to choose standard, hit apply, and what you'll see now is the text that you've highlighted as well as your case in Blue Book format with your pin site. Okay, so remembering that I need to cite to the actual page that this text appears on. So if I go here, and if I don't remember to do that, then just know anytime you need to look for your pin site, it's going to be the one that's bolded with a 1 star. So I see this is on actual page 403 because page 404 starts down here. Okay, so that's looking at your head notes and copying and pasting anything that you want to that. Let's go back to those listed head notes though. So I'm going to click head note 2 right here because then it's just going to jump me right back to the top where we came from with the list of head notes up at the top of the case. Scrolling down, I'm trying to see, are there any other rules that I want to take a look at that I might want to use or incorporate into my brief? Next place I find our terms highlighted is going to be head note 5. And I'm saying to myself, okay, well, this one's talking about First Amendment student speech. I want to find more cases like that. If I click this link over here to the right, I can click more like this head note. And what this will give me are cases that discuss the same rule or point of law. So here, obviously, Morse v. Frederick, the text of your head note appears up at the top. Scrolling down, here are some other cases and the head notes that they're talking about. So you can easily determine, are there rules in other cases that I want to take a closer look at. Now remember, because you have over 10,000 plus cases here on the left, you can always, again, filter on the left-hand side if you want to search within results for school sponsored, or if you want to just filter by your court. So for instance, if I'm here in California, I want to just look at my Ninth Circuit and Supreme Court cases because that's what's going to be binding within my jurisdiction. So I can do that if I select multiple right here in this link. I can choose Supreme Court, I can choose Ninth Circuit, hit OK, and then it will only give me cases from the Ninth Circuit or Supreme Court that are similar to my head note. Okay, you can also filter by publication status as well as timeline. But here's where you can find more cases that discuss this rule of law or point of law. So let's go back to our case. Now, one quick note, when I'm here, I just have to hit back one more time. More like this head note are going to find other cases that discuss a similar point of law. Okay, shepherdized now by this head note, you see there's only 80. That's a lot less than what we were just looking at. These are going to be those cases that actually cite to Morse for this particular head note. Okay, so that's the difference. More like this head note are going to be finding cases that also discuss the point of law, but not necessarily cited to Morse for that particular rule of law. Whereas when you shepherdize by it, then that's where you're finding cases that actually cite to Morse. I hope that helped clarify that a little bit for you. Okay, so now we're going to move on to part 3, where we're talking about shepherdizing. So you guys know from LRW that you always need to update or verify your law anytime you're finishing or submitting a brief or just even deciding whether to use a case within your particular legal document. You want to make sure that the cases that you're going to include on your case list are actually still valid good law. The way you do that on Lexis, we have shepherds, and that's considered the gold industry in the legal, the gold standard in the legal industry. So here we have our yellow triangle, which means caution, possible negative treatment is indicated, and you can always see the preview on the right-hand side of your screen. So you can click shepherdize this document or click the signal itself to bring us into the shepherd's report. Now on your handout, I outlined for you the 3 main points in time where shepherdizing can help you. It's not something that you want to just save and wait for until the end. It's something that can help you along the way. So the first way that shepherdizing can help you is to help you when you start researching for your brief, as it can help you to expand from what you've found already. So for instance, I'm looking at Morse v. Frederick right now. Let's say I want to find other sources that might have cited to it and help me get a better understanding of how this, maybe find other cases or other sources to help me out. So I'm going to move over here to other citing sources below where we are in citing decisions. And quick note, anytime you're on a shepherd's report, citing decisions are going to be all court cases that cited to your particular case. So these are going to be all court decisions that came after Morse that cited to Morse. Other citing sources is everything else that cites to Morse. Okay, so all your secondary sources, law reviews, briefs, pleadings, and motions that you see over here, anything else that came after Morse citing to Morse that's not a court decision will be found in other citing sources. So of course, you can always filter on the left-hand side if I want to find more treatises, or if I'm like, I really like this particular case, you find a case on your grand jury proceeding issue that you really like, and then you find sample briefs about it. Then maybe you'll pull some, it'll help you pull some other cases that you maybe haven't found yet, or come up with a little bit more creative arguments. Okay? Then while you're drafting your brief, you guys, you want to go to your citing decisions and not just to check if this is still good law, but to actually use it in a way to help advocate for your client. So in a persuasive way. Okay, so let's say, for instance, that Morse v. Frederick is a really bad case for my position. I'm Jesse Kapowski's parents' lawyer, and this case is actually really harmful to our argument, and obviously my opponent's going to be citing to it. So what I want to do then is I want to actually set myself apart from Morse v. Frederick so that I can say, hey, our cases are not quite the same, so you can't simply just rule that the law applies the same way. So when you're in your content analysis filters over here, the first one you'll find on the Shepard's report, you can go to caution distinguished by. So anytime you see distinguished by, this is going to be where you want to find cases that will help you set yourself apart from this one. Okay, so the really cool thing about Alexis Shepard's report is that we'll give you the link straight to the page number, so you don't have to go on a wild goose chase trying to find where this treatment appears in the entire opinion of the case. Rather, you just click on it. You can also see a preview of where that treatment's actually going to appear in that case. And again, if you want to filter to only the courts that are relevant to you, so if I only want to go to the Ninth Circuit, I can do that as well. So here, if I want to go to legal, click page 1829, then I'll see, okay, how did this particular legal case set itself apart or make itself different from Morse so that it wouldn't necessarily be treated the same exact way under the law. So again, distinguished by is going to be good if you're trying to set yourself apart from that. If it's a harmful case to your position, you want to use your distinguished by filters. All right, the next one that you want to use, so I'm just going to go off of this example, but anytime you can always go through your analysis here. But this legal case is a great, helps me demonstrate this point greatly. So if I find that Morse v. Frederick is actually a good case for my position, if of course I'm the Valley School District Attorney, and I'm saying to myself, Morse v. Frederick is going to be on point, and the court has to see that this is a great case for us, then I want to find other cases that have followed it or that have actually supported my case to help bolster my position, right? And so when you guys see green on Lexis on a Shepard's report, this is different than when you see green on any other research site. This is because green on Lexis actually means it's true positive support. This is what I call my 5-star Yelp review. When I'm talking about, okay, it's not just green because it's still good law and not been overturned, but rather it's green because, hey, this court, Leal, said, Morse v. Frederick, you ruled that correctly for reasons A, B, and C. Or we agree with the ruling in Morse v. Frederick for reasons X, Y, and Z. It gives you a little bit more affirmative support to your position. Okay, so again, you can always click here to find where it actually gave it that type of treatment. So the followed by, this green filter that you see here on a Shepard's report is going to be good if you want to find extra added cases to help your particular position. One thing to note though is you'll see one case can treat Morse v. Frederick or the case that you're looking at multiple different ways. So you kind of just have to take a look at it and see how it all reconciles with one another. But don't be discouraged if you see it's on both. Just take a look and see, okay, well, what did they say was different in Leal? But what did they say was actually good about Morse in this particular situation? Okay, so those are going to be, helpful for the advocacy parts of it. Now remember, anytime you guys are writing a legal document, like when you guys were in LRW and you're working on your memos, you had to use CREAC. So part of that is an explanation section of the cases you cited to in your rules section. So it's the same thing is going to happen. Anytime you have other legal documents that you're working on, you're going to have to explain the cases that you're citing to for your rules so that you can help guide the court and help them see how to apply those rules to your particular sets of facts. Okay, so the way that, I hear from a lot of students, a lot of first-year students working on their first types of assignments like this, that sometimes it's hard for them to figure out how to explain a case without, going into so much detail that they just end up writing, half the case back into their brief, or how to do it succinctly so that they're not missing out on the major points that they need to actually include within their brief. So the explain by filter, so anytime you're on a Shepherd's report, let's say I didn't have any filters here, you would find it under neutral, so it's going to be in blue, and you can go to explain by. So you see it here in the Leal case that we were also looking at. So this is going to give me an example of how the Ninth Circuit actually explained what happened in Morse v. Frederick when it was deciding its Leal opinion. Okay, so again, this is an example of how a court explains it so that it can help guide you in terms of what important points do I need to highlight from the Morse v. Frederick case that I can then use within my brief. So that's your explain by filter. Okay? Then, of course, anytime you are writing anything, you want to make sure you shepherdize at the end so that you know that everything you're citing to is still good law. Okay, so we make it super easy for you on Lexis, giving you different tools to help you with this. So where we're going to go is over here in the top left corner in the menu section, where you see these tiles. You have this option down below where it says LexisNexis Get and Print. So let's say you have your list of cases with the case citations or your table of authorities, and then you want to just go ahead, if you click on here, you can type in your citations and just separate them, like let's just 24 US 951. Separate them by semicolons. You don't have to do spaces or format it nicely. You don't even need to include case names. Just put all your cases in there, and what you can do is you can retrieve the Shepherd's report for all of it all at once. Then you can print it. So remember, you actually still do get free printing down in the library. You just click Use LexisNexis Printer, choose the printer that you want, and then you can print that. Or you can download it onto your computer if you want. But just remember, if you're going to print, if you don't see it on the printer itself, check the carousel next to it because our fabulous student reps file it alphabetically by last name for you. Okay, so that's one quick way to retrieve the Shepherd's reports for all of your cases. The other really cool thing we have, going back to that menu on the top left, is something called Shepherd's Brief Check. Shepherd's Brief Check is something where you can actually upload your brief onto the system, and we will run a report on your brief, checking your quotes if you want us to, checking your citations, as well as giving you the Shepherd's reports for all the cases that you cite to within your brief. It's very helpful and can help save you a lot of time. If you want more information about that, please feel free to contact me or one of your student reps, and we're happy to talk to you about that even further. Okay, so let's go ahead and click Alexis Advanced Research to bring us back to the research homepage over here on the top left. And as we finish up, I just want to give you a couple more quick tips. So we have the option now to look into this really cool source called Art of Advocacy. So if you type it into your red search wheel, like I said, it's like Google where it auto-populates for you what it thinks you're looking for. And we go to Appeals because you're working on an appellate brief. And now this is going to take us to the table of contents. On the handout, I've given you some sections and chapters that you might want to take a closer look at. So section 2, chapter 24. Again, if you just see these pluses, you just need to keep clicking on it until you see a blue link for you to click on. But here's where you can find do's and don'ts for brief writing. You can also find over here down below, chapter 31, the argument itself. What do I need to do? What do I need to think about for when I'm actually starting to draft my brief? Quick plug, we will be doing a follow-up training, a little bit more hands-on with the drafting tools that Lexis has available to you to help you as you put your brief together once you actually start drafting in a couple of weeks. And so we'll have training on Wednesday, January 24th at 1 p.m. Check the calendar and stop by the table if you need more information about that. Okay? So for now, let's just recap what we've gone through so far. So we ran our search, we figured out how to formulate a search. Then we started in our secondary source, determining the cause of action. And then in our research plan, we went to our statutes and legislation if we need to look at the law a little bit closer. And then I went to my cases, right? So we went into the cases filter, looking at a specific case. First to determine whether it's going to be helpful for us, then to look for those specific rules that we want to find. A lot of times, if you're going to get an assignment, you might be given only one element or one test that you need to focus on. So that's going to be a great way to search within your results or to narrow down your results so that you're not wasting time going through a bunch of hits that you'll get back that maybe won't be relevant to your particular issue. Okay? And then, like I said, if you're trying to figure out which cases to choose, look for the ones that have appeared in your treatise. Look for the ones that appear often in the case notes or as well as in the case law filter that you found, but making sure that the cases that you want to use are going to be ones that have a good discussion of the law, that lay out certain elements, certain tests, or define legal definitions for you, or legal terms for you that might help with your analysis. Okay, and then you apply the court's discussion of those rules and elements to your particular set of facts. And then, of course, at the very end, you're making sure that you're shepherdizing and making sure you're still citing to good law. All right. Well, good luck to all of you this semester. Like I said, this is something I really enjoyed. This is one of my favorite trainings to give because I really do think written and oral advocacy is one of the funnest parts of being a lawyer. So I wish you all the best with this particular assignment. If there's anything I can do for you, please feel free to reach out to me. My contact information is on the handout, and I'm sure you guys get my emails. Make sure to like our Facebook page if you haven't already, Lexis at Berkeley Law, because we run specific exclusive opportunities for points there that way. And our social specialists on our student rep team are amazing at posting great content, not just Lexis related, but some fun stuff for you guys to check out. Also, we still table every Tuesdays in the donor lobby from 11 to 2. We have free coffee for you guys and 100 points for quick table tips that take less than 5 minutes. So find us in the donor lobby on Tuesdays from 11 to 2. Again, free coffee, 100 points every week. So don't miss out on that as well. Okay. If you want to get the points for this, the 400 points from listening to this training, just email me back with one thing that you learned from today. I hope you learned more than one thing, but just go ahead and send me that and I'll go ahead and confirm you for your points. Again, good luck to all of you. I wish you all the best and I hope to see you guys around soon. All right, take care.